AITA for blocking my husband after not checking up on me and my son all day. Basically, he's been giving me the silent treatment all week. We've been sleeping in 2 separate rooms. His decision, not mine's. I posted a photo of me and my son. I wrote a caption of how he's made me a better version of myself, etc. Mind you, I said nothing disrespectful or made it seem to the world like I was a single mother posting that I'm the only parent taking care of my son. Let's also not forget that I have my wedding ring on in all my pictures. I'm always posting my family, my husband. And there is no way anyone can come across my page and think I don't have a husband or family. After I post the picture, he says the original caption I had on there was different from what's currently on there now. I don't remember changing the caption. I did delete the picture I posted before, which is the same exact thread of pictures. I just didn't like the filter. So I edited the picture again and reposted it, copying the same exact caption I had before, and posted for a second time so I wouldn't have to rewrite it. But in his words, I changed it, and this is what he remembers reading. The most important man in my life is parts of the caption. As I said before, I didn't post that or change my caption. I feel as if he probably read it too fast or wanted to find a reason it delusional. Actually, it occurs an agreement between us. He doesn't mention this to me until I try posting a picture of us last weekend as a family. I didn't have the chance to post a few weeks ago and tried tagging him to realize he unfollows me on IG. Weird, right? So I text with a screenshot of IG saying I can't tag him because he's away for work that night. I asked, "Why did you unfollow me?" His reply was, "I want you to have more freedom in posting what you want without you worrying about me watching you on social media." Hours before I found out he did. We spoke on the phone as if nothing was going on. I guess he tried calling before. And my phone was on DND and I was sleeping. He says later on during the week that when he called it was to ask me about the post. So why didn't he mention it the second time around when he called? And waited till I realize we aren't following each other to tell me how he feels. My son is almost 2, so there is no reason why for me to reference him as the most important man in my life because 1, that title belongs to my husband. And 2, my son's a little boy. How does that even make sense? So all week he's been ignoring my text. And when I come home from work, we forcefully say hi. He goes upstairs and I'm left putting our son to bed. And the whole cycle begins again the next day. Today has really made me realize he doesn't gaff about me and my son. I've mentioned before, regardless of what we're going through, if you're away for work, even though you're upset with me, still call to see how our son is doing. And if I told you what you saw was incorrect, you should believe me. Instead of calling me a liar and saying that I posted that caption to slick diss him on social media because I have something against him. Which is wrong because I've never brought our relationship issues to social media, and why would I now? Lastly, I tried talking to him about it during the week. The convo went nowhere and my son was getting very fussy and wanted to go to bed. I thought after the did he'd come to finish the convo or ask how can we move forward. Wrong. TBH, it's always me trying to fix things and always apologizing for things in our relationship. I'm always the problem. He never takes accountability for anything. He continues to repeat that he knows what he saw. And there's no way he will change his mind on what he understood from the caption. And what hurts him the most is that I am backstabbing him and lying to his face about what I wrote. And he doesn't do well with liars and doesn't see how he can move forward from this situation.
They say glass shatters fast, but the truth is, glass breaks long before it explodes. The fracture lines begin invisible, hairline cracks running beneath the surface where no one bothers to look. My name is Elena Cruz, and my family owned Cruz Crystal Works, a glass company passed down through 3 generations. My grandfather made windows for cathedrals. My father crafted chandeliers that hung in hotels across Europe. And me? I thought I would inherit light itself. But inheritance is not always given. Sometimes it's stolen, signed away behind your back with a pen dipped in betrayal. The night I learned the truth, I stood in the boardroom where my name should have been engraved on a contract. My brother Tomas poured whiskey like a king. My cousin Sophia smiled like a snake, and the lawyer slid the papers across the table. "Elena," Tomas said, his voice almost gentle, "this is business. Don't take it personally." But family is the most personal thing in the world. I grew up in the furnace rooms, where molten glass glowed like trapped suns. My father taught me how to blow into the iron pipe, how to breathe life into liquid fire until it cooled into shape. "Glass remembers," he'd say, holding up a finished vase. "Every breath, every hand, every hesitation, it stays inside." I believed him. When he passed, I assumed I'd take his seat. I had studied design, finance, leadership. I'd earned the respect of the workers. They called me La Hija del Fuego, the daughter of fire. But Tomas, older by 6 years, had always believed the company was his. He never cared for the art, only the power. And Sophia, our cousin, was his shadow, whispering poison in his ear. The day of the board vote, I walked in with hope tucked neatly under my blazer. My father's will had left the company to his children, jointly. But wills are clay in the hands of lawyers. The contracts on the table showed a restructuring. Tomas would be CEO, Sophia CFO. My role, decorative, a creative director with no vote, no power, no access to the books. I felt the glass crack inside me. "This is temporary," Tomas said. "You'll thank us when the company grows." But I knew growth was his code for greed. The months that followed were hell. I designed glassware that won awards, but my name was erased. Sophia controlled the budgets, cutting corners, paying workers late. Tomas brokered deals with investors who valued speed over craft. When I protested, they smiled. "You're emotional, Elena, not business-minded." The workers saw it too. They whispered in the furnace rooms, angry but powerless. One day, my father's oldest apprentice came to me, hands shaking. "Señorita," he said, "they sold the cathedral contract, cheap, to foreigners. They betrayed your father's legacy." I went to the board. I showed evidence. Tomas laughed in my face. "You think honor pays bills?" he sneered. "Wake up." And then the final blow. They removed me entirely. "Conflict of interest," the letter said, as if I was the danger. I walked out of Cruz Crystalworks that night with nothing but ashes in my chest. Betrayal has a taste. It's metallic, sharp. I drowned in it. My savings dwindled. My apartment shrank. The press wrote flattering profiles of Tomas, calling him the visionary. I stopped going near glass. It hurt too much. Until one night, drunk and furious, I hurled a wine glass against the wall. It shattered, of course it did, but the shards caught the streetlight, scattering rainbows across the room. And suddenly, I remembered. Glass remembers. So did I. Revenge began as a whisper. If they had stolen my legacy, I would make something they couldn't touch. I rented an abandoned workshop in the old Port District. With the last of my savings, I bought a small furnace. Workers, loyal to my father's memory, found me. "If you're rising, we're with you," they said. I named the new company Vitria, from the Latin for glass, but also from truth. We made glass that breathed honesty, hand-blown, imperfect, beautiful. No cutting corners, no soulless contracts. And slowly, the city noticed. Tomas didn't notice at first. Why would he? To him, I was a mosquito buzzing at the edges of his empire. But when Vitria landed a contract with the museum, the contract he thought was his, he called me. His voice was cold as ice. "Elena, what game are you playing?" "No game," I said, "just fire." Sophia made the mistake. She forged numbers on quarterly reports. A journalist friend, one who remembered my father's generosity, came to me with documents. "Do you want this public?" he asked. I thought of revenge, of Tomas humiliated, Sophia ruined, and I said yes. The scandal hit like a hammer. Investors fled. Workers rioted. the board turned on Tomas and Sophia, gnashing their teeth at the very mouths that had once fed them. Vitriol grew in the ruins. We hired the betrayed workers, the apprentices who'd been silenced. We made chandeliers that told stories, windows that carried light like prayers. One day, standing in the new workshop, I placed my palm on a cooling sheet of glass. My reflection stared back, fractured by light. Every breath, every hand, every hesitation, it stays inside, I whispered, repeating my father's words. But this time, the glass didn't carry betrayal. It carried survival. Tomas came to see me once. No press, no lawyers, just a broken man. You won, he said bitterly. No, I told him. I lived. There's a difference. He asked for forgiveness. I didn't give it. Some debts aren't paid in words, but I let him leave. That was enough. Now, when people ask what vitriol means, I tell them it means glass, yes, but it also means this, that even when shattered, glass can be melted, reshaped, reborn, and so can a woman, because betrayal may crack you, but it cannot decide what you do with the pieces.
They say steel is unbreakable. That's a lie. Steel rusts. Steel bends. Steel shatters if you push it past its limit. I should know. I built skyscrapers with my bare hands, stood on beams 100 stories high, balanced between sky and death, and thought my brothers in arms would never let me fall. My name is Daniel Vega, and once, I was set to inherit an empire of concrete and steel. But the men I called family sold me out, smiling while they buried me alive beneath debts and lies. The night I lost everything, I stood on the unfinished 52nd floor of a tower we were building, staring at the city lights. Behind me, my partner Miguel clapped me on the back and said, "Don't worry, hermano. I'll fix it." He didn't. I wasn't born into wealth. I was born into dirt and noise, son of a foreman who worked until his hands looked like cracked leather. He used to say, buildings outlive men. But every building carries the ghost of the men who raised it. I carried that in my bones. I studied civil engineering by day, worked rebar crews by night. Sweat, debt, broken knuckles, all of it poured into one goal, to build something with my name on it. By 35, I was co-owner of Vega and Morales Construction, a firm Miguel and I had built from nothing. We were brothers, not by blood, but by steel. Or so I thought. At first, it was little things. Bids that didn't add up. Materials that arrived late. Miguel brushing me off with a laugh, "Relax, Danny. Paperwork's messy. That's why I handle the numbers." I trusted him. I handled the men, the sites, the sweat. He handled the books. But one night, at the bar across from our yard, one of the younger guys slipped. Heard Miguel's been meeting with Alvarez on the side. Alvarez. Our biggest rival. The man who tried to buy us out 3 times. When I confronted Miguel, he smirked. "Networking," he said. "That's how business works." I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. The hammer fell fast. An inspector found faulty steel beams in one of our towers. Cheap imports, brittle as glass. The blame? Pinned on me. My signature forged on the purchase orders. The lawsuits came like a storm. Investors pulled out. Workers lost jobs. My father's legacy drowned in paperwork that screamed my guilt. Miguel stood in court, hand on the Bible, swearing he had no idea. And me? I was left with nothing but debts I hadn't signed, a reputation in ashes, and the taste of iron in my mouth. You don't know loneliness until you walk past a half-built tower at midnight and realize no one will ever climb those beams with your name in their mouths again. I lost my apartment. I lost my truck. I drank in silence, because when men fall, people don't ask if you were pushed, they assume you jumped. But I didn't jump. I was shoved. And if there's one thing about steel, it remembers pressure. It bends. But it doesn't forget. Neither did I. Revenge doesn't begin with fire. It begins with a spark. For me, it was Diego, one of the old welders. He found me slumped outside a pawn shop, handed me a folder, and said, "I kept copies. Thought you might need them." Inside were receipts, emails, proof that Miguel had funneled money through shell companies, that Alvarez had supplied the faulty steel, and my forged signatures, traced with the kind of precision only greed produces. I stared at those pages until my hands shook. And then I knew they had built their empire on my ruin. Time to return the favor. I started small. Day labor jobs. Fixing sidewalks, patching bridges. But word spread, Vega's back. The men who'd worked under me remembered. They came quietly, one by one. We rented a warehouse, bought tools secondhand. Called ourselves Iron Bones. A joke, at first. Then a banner. We built honestly. No scams, no shortcuts. Just steel, sweat, and loyalty. And slowly, contracts came. Small at first, then bigger. A school renovation. A public library. Projects Miguel wouldn't touch because the margins were thin. But I didn't want margins. I wanted roots. When the city opened bids for a new bridge, Alvarez and Morales expected to win. They had the money, the lawyers, the bribes. What they didn't have was loyalty. Our workers underbid them, not because we cheated, but because we didn't skim. When we got the contract, Miguel's face turned red in the papers. That was the first blow. The second came when I leaked the forged contracts to the press. Reporters swarmed. Alvarez denied everything, Miguel stammered. But the evidence spoke louder. Still, it wasn't enough. I didn't just want them exposed. I wanted them broken. It happened on the skeleton of a skyscraper. Miguel came to me, hard hat in hand, anger sharp in his eyes. "You should have stayed down, Danny," he hissed. "We gave you an out." "No," I said, standing on the beam, the city yawning below us. "You buried me. But you forgot steel bends before it breaks." For a moment, I thought he might shove me. But he didn't. Cowards rarely do their own dirty work. Instead, he left with a warning. And I left with fire in my blood. The lawsuits reversed. The city pressed charges. Alvarez fled overseas. Miguel? Bankrupt, disgraced, a ghost in the empire he stole. And me? Iron Bones grew. We built housing for the men who'd been left jobless. We rebuilt the tower Miguel had collapsed, this time stronger, safer, honest. The workers called it the Vega Spire. One night, standing on its top floor, I felt the wind whip against my face and thought of my father. "Buildings outlive men," he'd said. "But they carry the ghosts." This building carried mine. People ask if I forgave Miguel. No. Forgiveness is for men who stumble. Betrayal is not a stumble, it's a shove. I didn't forgive. I didn't forget. But I outlived him. And in the end, that was enough. Because steel remembers. And so do I.
My brother stole my father's last words, and with them, he stole my life. That's how this story begins. Not with fire, not with a collapse, but with a whisper in a hospital room, and a forged signature that turned my blood into dust. My name is Rafael Torres, and I learned the hard way that family cuts deeper than knives. My father, Hernando Torres, wasn't a rich man when he was born. He was the son of farmers, raised barefoot in fields where the sun split your skin and the earth ate your sweat. But by the time he lay dying, he owned enough land to stretch further than a man could walk in a day. Farms, construction yards, even an old quarry turned into stoneworks. He built it with his hands, his back, and his stubborn belief that work was sacred. Tierra is not just soil, he would say. It's memory. Every acre carries the weight of who worked it, who bled for it, who was buried beneath it. When the sickness came, it ate him fast. By the time I got the call from the hospital, he was already fading. My brother Victor was already there, of course he was. Victor was always first, always the golden son. The one who never sweated but always smiled. When I arrived, my father's hand was trembling, clutching a stack of papers. His eyes, foggy, weak, found me. Rafa, his voice was gravel. Equal. It's for both of you. Remember that. Equal. I nodded, tears hot in my throat. He pressed the papers to my chest. His fingers smelled like soil even in that sterile room. And then, he was gone. I thought I knew what he meant. But when the will was read, my name wasn't on it. The land, all of it, belonged to Victor. The lawyer cleared his throat, reading the forged words that carved my father's empire into Victor's hands. I interrupted. That's not possible. He said equal. I was there. The lawyer wouldn't meet my eyes. Victor smirked. Words vanish. Ink stays. And just like that, my life collapsed. I stormed out, the taste of betrayal like blood in my mouth. Outside the office, I shoved Victor against the wall. You forged it, I spat. Don't you dare stand there with our father's name in your mouth. Victor adjusted his cufflinks, calm as a snake. I didn't steal anything. I protected it. You never had the stomach for business. You'd give it away, waste it. This way, it stays in the family. My family. I raised my fist, but stopped. Not because he didn't deserve it, but because I knew then he had already won. By the end of the week, my accounts were frozen, my access revoked, and every worker who had once looked at me with respect now answered to Victor's orders. He offered me a job, as if I were some beggar. Foreman on land that should have been mine. I refused. And with that prideful refusal, I walked away with nothing. The city swallowed me. A one-room apartment that smelled of mold. Work came in scraps, day labor on construction crews, hauling bricks until my back screamed. At night, I sat in bars, staring into glasses of cheap whiskey, hearing Victor's words echo, ink stays. I thought about my father's last breath. About the papers pressed into my chest. About the betrayal written in blue pen. Some nights, I almost convinced myself to let it go. To live small. To disappear. But land doesn't let you forget. When I worked the earth on job sites, every shovel reminded me this was supposed to be mine. And slowly, the bitterness hardened into something sharper. Not grief. Not pity. Resolve. The first to come back to me was Diego, one of my father's oldest workers. A welder with hands blackened by 40 years of fire. He found me on a job site, lifted my chin, and said, "Senor Rafael, if you rise, we rise with you." At first I laughed. What did I have to rise with? No land, no money, no name left. But Diego wasn't alone. More came. Old men who remembered my father's fairness. Young men who hated Victor's cruelty. They slipped me food, tools, whispered loyalty. We met in abandoned lots on weekends. At first, it was just clearing brush, fixing fences. Then we built a garden. A shelter. Small things, humble things. But people noticed. They said, the Torres son is back. The honest one. Victor noticed too. It started with lawyers. Letters threatening to shut us down. Then inspectors suddenly appeared, demanding permits for things that didn't need permits. And when that didn't work, thugs showed up, men Victor paid to scare us off. But the workers stood like walls around me. They had nothing left to lose, and they'd had enough of his greed. Every time Victor tried to crush me, more people rallied to my side. And then, a miracle. An old woman arrived at my workshop one evening, carrying a bundle of yellow deeds. "Your father promised me protection," she said. "Victor raised my rent instead. He threatened my family. Take these. Do what he never did." Inside were deeds Victor had hidden, land titles still under my father's old name. It was leverage. Finally, I had a weapon. With those deeds, I sold what I could, built with what I couldn't. A block of housing for workers. A cooperative farm on unused land. People flocked to us. Journalists came. They wrote stories, the betrayed son building from dust. Victor raged. He called me a thief, a liar, a disgrace. But every word he hurled only drew more eyes to me. And then I found his weakness. The ledgers. Hidden by workers who despised him, the books showed years of fraud, extortion, and laundering. Proof that his empire was built not just on betrayal, but on rot. I had the truth in my hands. I waited until the city council meeting, the one where Victor was supposed to unveil his newest development, a gleaming tower of glass and arrogance. I walked in, folder in hand, dirt still on my boots. When my turn came, I laid the ledgers on the table. This, I said, voice steady, is the truth. Every forged signature. Every bribe. Every stolen acre. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Reporters scribbled. Cameras flashed. Victor stood, face white as chalk. This is slander. No, I said. This is soil. And soil doesn't lie. The room erupted. That night, Victor called me, voice shaking with fury. You think you're a hero? He hissed. No, I told him. I'm the dirt under your nails. And dirt never forgets. The investigation tore through his empire. Fraud charges. Tax evasion. Contracts voided. Investors fled. Victor, once untouchable, was dragged into court in handcuffs. His smirk was gone. The workers cheered for me. But I didn't cheer. Because revenge doesn't taste sweet. It tastes like iron. Still, I stood taller. For the first time since my father's death, I felt his spirit at my back. I rebuilt, not an empire, but a community. Housing for workers who had been cheated. Schools for their children. Fields restored to families Victor had stolen from. It wasn't about wealth anymore. It was about justice. One evening, I stood in the middle of the cooperative farm, the sunset bleeding gold across the fields. I pressed my hands into the soil. Equal, my father had whispered. For both of you. Victor hadn't honored those words. But I would. Victor asked to see me before sentencing. In the prison yard, he looked smaller, shrunken. You'll never forgive me, he said. You're right, I answered. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. But I survived. I rose. And that's enough. He looked at me one last time, and for the first time in his life, I saw fear. Now, when I walk the land, I feel my father in the wind, and the weight of soil on my boots. The empire is not what it was. It's smaller. Simpler. But honest. Built not on forged ink, but on sweat. And every time I lift a handful of dirt, I remember. My brother stole my father's last words. But I built a life out of dust. And in the end, blood may betray you. But the earth never will.